regardless of which type of lens you're using to shoot from the beach, you really want to try and make it as interesting as possible for the people who are going to be looking at your photos. I've covered the small kind of niche areas where you're going to want to identify that person really well, like competitions, training, surf schools, things like that. But for everyone else, myself included, the majority of the time you spend taking surf photos is kind of for yourself. It's to get a nice image for the wall perhaps, or for a friend. So I tend to use a smaller 55 to 210mm, for instance. You might use a 70 to 200, 100, 400, etc. But one of the things I find most important about going to the beach and taking surf photos is to get a variety of angles. And one of the most amazing things about surf photography is you're always, nearly always, at a beautiful place. The beach is somewhere a lot of people go just to spend time, and you're there because you have to surf. You don't have to surf, but when you surf, you have to be at somewhere near the coast. So whether that's a cliff path with a reef or a point, or whether it's a lovely beach or even not so nice beach, you're going to have stuff of interest around you, and you can make the most of that as a surf photographer and also capture the surfing action or the waves themselves or anything like that. So I would make a special effort next time you go to think about where you've shot from before, from that beach, and then try a different angle. So there's a few local spots to me which I've shot photos at for decades now, and I'm probably still guilty of going for the easy option, getting the shot from, okay, there's the car park essentially. So the car park shot is nice to have, but everyone who's ever been there has seen that angle of that beach. So then there's the cliff path shot. Okay, still a bit better, but like I say, half the people who've been to that beach have seen that angle. What you really want to try and do, I think, is to get an angle that when you take a photo from that angle, perhaps people don't even recognize it as that beach. And I've had that before where I've taken a photo of my local beach, I've surfed there for years, and other people who have surfed there for years won't believe that it's that spot. they'll say, no, the background is not like that. You wouldn't see that from the background of that beach. And I mean, I know I have because I've taken that photo, but the answer is to go to the places where people don't usually go and try and get those photos. So I've gone, walk out pick your way over the rocks on a lower tide. Make sure you're very familiar with the tides because you don't want to get cut off. Especially with your camera stuff, it's going to be hard to scrabble quickly and get back around the corner. So just as a surf photographer, you should take it upon yourself to know the area, to learn the tides, get a watch with the tide on if you can, or at least a paper tide timetable, or just check your phone, I suppose. It's probably the easiest way. Make sure you know what time low tide, high tide is, how fast it's going to come in and out, what the tide height is. And it's kind of second nature. If you're already a surfer, this is the kind of thing that you take for granted. You're like, well, yeah, I when I drive over a bridge with a tidal river in my hometown, I just subconsciously clock the tide and I'm like, oh yeah, it's going out, so it's pretty low. It's lower than I thought it would be today. I think a lot of people who are just getting into surf photography maybe don't understand or haven't had the need to understand tides in the way that us surfers do. Or perhaps if you're from an area where the tides aren't very big, then less of an issue. But here in the UK, at least, they're really big. So be aware of those kind of environmental factors that are going to affect where you can shoot from and where the people are going to be surfing. There can be, especially in the UK, there can be a completely different look to or opportunity to shoot for a break at high tide than there is at low tide. There might not be any waves at low tide. There might only break at high tide. There might only be a wave at mid tide. There's lots of factors that you need to work out. But as a photographer, you can take advantage of the fact that not everyone's going to walk all the way out to the end of the rocks on low tide, and they're not going to have seen what it looks like to be there and look towards the beach or parallel with the waves. Is a really great angle normally. So I'll post up a couple of examples of the same beach from different angles, so you can see. I think there's a great advantage to going to having a different perspective to what people usually see. So whether that's trying to get down low or get up high on a cliff, or just behind a building and not your normal car park, basically. There's lots of different ways you can improve the interest in your shots. And I think the first thing you should think is, where have I been, where would I go if I wasn't a surfer on this beach, and then avoid those places. That's a good rule of thumb. But always be safe, always know about the tides, and always be very careful around the edges of cliffs and anywhere where there's a possibility of falling or anything like that naturally. Make sure you use your common sense. It's not worth, any surf photo isn't worth damaging yourself for. Too bad. No, at all. So that's some really basic tips on how to get the most out of your land photography. It might seem really obvious, but a lot of people don't do this. They just shoot from the car park with a tripod every time, and you're never going to get that interesting a shot. You might get a really great shot, but the next 50 shots you take are going to be very, very similar. So not the best scenario. So there you go.